even prior to philosophers such as Friedrich Hegel, F.H. Bradley, and Giovanni Gentile, ideas with implications pertaining to fascism can be traced back to the dawn of human existence. In order to understand why fascism came about, including in its primitive forms, originally invented by Hegel, but expanded upon by French socialists, including Georges Sorel, I'll go over two main concepts which this video will revolve around: pareidolia and connotations. Pareidolia refers to the perceptual occurrence of faces, or human characteristics, or things which aren't what one's looking at, located within inanimate objects or natural scenery. Seeing eyes in nature, thinking one's staring at a human face in a tree. These are examples of pareidolia. Due to unusual, bizarre arrangements of things, certain objects and properties can resemble something they're not, causing someone to become confused, mistaking an item as being of a different property. The next thing we need to understand is that of a connotation. A connotation is a sensibility, external meaning, or perception something, anything, possesses to an individual, but doesn't possess in the thing itself. It is a socially constructed phenomenon of people attributing qualities or characteristics to images, objects, words, and events, without such qualities or characteristics existing inherently within such content. For example, what do you see here? Well, if we're being literal, it's a character created by Nintendo for the Zelda game Wind Waker, referred to as Tetra. But if we're talking about what actually arrives to our mind, let's be honest, it's the Leafy is here avatar/icon. Because Leafy used to this image as his YouTube icon, the character in question, especially in this image, has unironically been referred to as the Leafy is here avatar, despite it not being created by Leafy or even for Leafy. It belongs to Nintendo as their intellectual property, and possesses no ties to the now exiled YouTuber, but nonetheless, it's a perfect example of a connotation. If people recognize that it's not referring to Leafy, with this character existing independently, being created independently, but still point out that it's so strongly associated with Leafy, you can understand why their first thought would be, oh, Leafy. That's fine reasoning. When people use this image as their YouTube channel's avatar icon, over 90% of the time, it's not because they're a fan of The Legend of Zelda, The Wind Waker. No, it's just because they like Leafy is here, because he started this trend. So, where am I going with this? Well, think of it this way. In the very, very beginning, back to the days of cavemen, the Paleolithic era, due to hunter-gatherers, our human ancestors, not knowing how to distinguish between real faces and objects which appear as though they're faces, they naturally attributed meaning to such perception-only phenomenon. They built an entire religion around this belief, known as animism. They attributed souls, consciousness, and spiritual essence to inanimate objects, because they genuinely believed these things were alive, living, and existing, just as us humans were. Likewise, human beings in the modern day create these things called nations, attributing specific meanings and souls to patches of land. If consciousness determines the course of existence, it determines the personality of the nation, the importance it has on and gives to a people. The minds and beliefs and thoughts of the people, residing within a certain geographical space of land or territory, provide the laws for this select area and govern it through their imagination. The way the nation feels, its soul, is based entirely upon the same philosophy animating animism, metaphysical idealism. Many indigenous tribes still practiced animism, including a large portion of the sub-Sahara, which means that many people adhere to non-scientific, even anti-scientific means of subsistence, of acquiring meaning. A lot of the time, materialists, liberals, and Marxists will critique the ideas of nation and of state because to them everything has to be supported by science. But what they neglect to recognize is that consciousness had to have arrived prior to science, since it is the mind that generates and maintains everything, which would of course include matter, and all properties collectively called science. Because we can't separate ourselves from the state, from our historical fatherland, and the purpose in life it has gifted us, all these social constructions are part of us, and made and shaped and crafted by us, with our everyday thoughts molding our futures. If we see something and believe it to be real, what's the difference between this reality and a scientific variation of it? Whether or not matter is present, the truth is that events have still taken place. This, at least, makes more sense than a set of scenes devoid of any eyes or ears to detect it. Idealism affirms that the only means materialists have of criticizing the consciousness-oriented ontology is by possessing consciousness themselves. The idea that only matter can bring about life can't exist without a mind to create such an idea. Ideology is an idea. Matter is an idea. As states and nations are ideas, so are atoms equally. So any dispute between science and surrealism is a false dichotomy. To put it all into perspective, out of a mixture of human primitiveness and pareidolia arrived atomism, because it stood on the conviction and dedication to such pareidolia. Ancient human beings didn't really know the scientific methods, so they lumped figures they saw in trees and faces they saw in rocks in with real-life figures and faces. Idealism was derived from animism, since it stated its support for a consciousness-based reality. Whether or not particles endorse the existence of the connotations/meanings we attributed to random objects, the truth is that such particles weren't needed to prove them to be what people perceive them to be. The fact they perceive them to be one thing is all that it takes to make them what they are. If we found out that certain properties were devoid of matter, the fact we can still see them is evidence that a substance-based approach to ontology is probably incorrect. Fascism derived out of idealism, because it originally carried out as a modification to orthodox Marxism. Certain socialists, such as Benito Mussolini and Georges Sorel, adopted Marxist philosophy but rejected its ontological roots in replacement for immaterial metaphysics. As a result, especially after Mussolini was exiled from the Italian Socialist Party for supporting war as a means of bringing about socialism, Marxism became more and more modified, becoming gradually more compatible with idealist principles until it was no longer Marxism, with national cynicalism, so actually cynicalism at the time, and revolutionary nationalistic socialism taking its place. Fascism later developed as a simple term referring to a wide range of political policies, beliefs, and convictions existing as the implications of idealism. When examining the idealist philosophy, Gentile realized that this ontology could be utilized to create a specific, perfect parallel to everything which emerged from the European Enlightenment, being the ultimate challenge to liberalism, Marxism, and conservatism, a postmodern brew that could adopt elements from many ideologies, in particular socialism, and attach a spiritual code of honor to it, all throughout the Third French Republic and Italy, later Spain, Austria, Romania, and Greece. Fascism developed as a political system based off of 21st century theories of a new national awakening.